I remember just thinking, holy smokes, I can't believe this is the product of all of that work. It was like the whole process was done and he had done everything he said. It felt like such a relief that it was done the way we wanted. Everything was the way we discussed. And I don't even think there were any major cost overruns. It was great. It was fantastic walking in and seeing the way things had turned out.
It was amazing to see our vision in real life. Like we had this idea of what we wanted it to look like, and we talked to Dave about it, and then to walk in the door and be like, oh, this is it. It was neat to see.
Like, oh my God, he actually did it.
Yeah.
I really liked David. It felt like I had met a friend who was helping me fix up my house instead of a contractor.
After meeting with the other contractors, it was a breath of fresh air to meet David, who listened to us, understood what we were looking for, made some suggestions, but didn't force those suggestions on us. Just like, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? So he understood what we were looking for and was able to give us a couple of other things that were like, ooh, I like that. So we changed a few things.
David I don't think he was the most expensive bid. He certainly wasn't the cheapest bid. But we felt that the value for his bid far surpassed everybody else. What he brought to the table in terms of communication and, like she had mentioned, his listening. We just felt like he was on the same page with us throughout.
So David, he took out a wall that was kind of cutting off the flow between the dining room and kitchen. He added a peninsula. He added a fireplace in our master bedroom. He closed in a loft. He changed out the flooring.
When we took out the wall, we had to move a lot of the kitchen appliances to a different wall. So that required some extensive electrical work. The loft was converted into a bedroom for our son. And he actually reused the cabinetry from the wall we took out and put that in the mudroom for us. So I think it was even before we closed on the house, potentially, that he came and walked through it with us because we knew we wanted to do some things. And he walked through and made suggestions and listened to our ideas. He was very communicative with what we wanted. He never pushed anything on us, any of his ideas. He would take what we were saying and maybe run with it a little bit. But if we showed any pushback, he was done with that and went with whatever we wanted. In terms of the entire process throughout while he was doing the construction, I think he was here every day, if not every other day. So we saw him a lot. And any major remodel like that, things are going to change. We would have a new idea or a new color or something like that. So he was very adaptable. He would always come to us if there was going to be anything, it felt like not even significant, but if it was just anything other than what we had discussed, he would come and talk to us. So I felt like it was very much a collaborative process. So when we took out the wall, we didn't know if it was structural. And it was going to be a major project if it was. David talked about how we could figure it out. how we could cut into the wall, look at the beam, and then if it was structural, what we would have to do. And I talked to the original homeowner to find out if he knew. But he had actually left me a CD of photos of the house construction. And so David and I were able to go back together and look through those photos and figure out where the structural beam connected and determine that it was actually 2 feet outside that wall. And so rather than just go in with a bunch of demo trying to figure it out, that could have been much more expensive, he was creative in finding a way to do it less intrusively, cheaper, faster, that was still safe. And I just remember thinking how impressive that was and what a relief it was to not have to deal with all that extra stuff.
The construction was happening, we would always come over and look at it and say, oh, look at this, what's happening. We came over after the painters had painted the upstairs, and we were like, oh no, this isn't the right paint color. And so Jonathan called Dave and said, hey, are you sure you have the right paint color? And he lived like 45 minutes away from here. He was on a weekend, drove down here, made sure the paint color was right. And he's like, guys, the paint wasn't quite dry yet. It dries a little bit differently. And we were like, oh. But for him to take time out of his day, drive all the way down here just to look at the paint color, just showed us how much he cared about about the remodel and about how that he wanted us to love it as much as we would. The other thing we loved about David was his time that he spent with our son. He was 2 at the time, was big into construction, had his Bob the Builder tool belt, and Dave would allow Owen to do things, hold a hammer or look at a wall or different construction stuff. So he was really good with our son at the time too.
So we've been talking about a deck for a couple of years, and it's daunting. We don't want to go through the process, right? It's time consuming, it's emotional. Do you really want to sink the money into this? Do you want to go find somebody to build it? And David, when he did our house, was still kind of getting started. So we thought, he's moved on, he's doing bigger projects, he's not going to do a deck. But when he contacted us about this, Katie said, hey, are you still doing decks? And he said, absolutely. And she actually looked at me and said, we're done. That's fine. I know that David's going to do a great job. I know he's not going to be the cheapest, but I trust him and I know it will come out right. So it wasn't a hard decision.